one of the issues that I got involved with right from the beginning was prejudice. What is prejudice and what makes people practice prejudice? I think in some respect, we are born with it, we get it with every interaction with our families. I say it's passed on from parents to children through the cookies and milk that our mothers serve us. What does it really mean? It means to judge other people, not because we know them or we know anything about them, but because we have some preconceived actions. So prejudge them without. And why is it important? Because prejudice, at its worst, it creates a Holocaust. It creates a genocide. And it's often used by leaders to pick on the minorities and treat them with prejudice. I have written a few things about them. I call prejudice the cancer of the human soul. In my opinion, it destroys people and societies that permit it to happen. And this is what we are trying to prevent. At the Holocaust Museum here, we have a marquee. I call it, let's remove hatred and prejudice from our world, because it's really the job of all of us. And I always say, let it begin with me, because I have to work at it. There are people, let's say that I just take a little example. I go somewhere, I don't know the place I am going to, I don't know exactly the people, and as I enter there, I see a lot of people who look quite different than I look. Maybe the women are all wearing burqas. That immediately makes me very uncomfortable. How will I communicate with them? Actually, it happened one day here at the Holocaust Museum. I had a group of ISU students, and these were all students from Arab countries, foreign students, and there were two women with burqas. And all I could see were their eyes. And at my lectures, I always try to look at the people's eyes, because I try to communicate with them by looking at them. What happened was that I didn't realize that a very religious Muslim woman will not look at another person's eyes. So I could not communicate with them, and it was really, from my perspective, it was very uncomfortable for me. But I couldn't really judge them on the way they looked, really. The rest of the students, who were all from the same country, I think Saudi Arabia, were very polite, very pleasant, and very involved in what I was doing. So, but I was uncomfortable. And that is what I'm saying. The way we look, the first thing that we see when we see other people is how we look. And if we are uncomfortable, I think that communication already has a hurdle that we have difficulty to overcome. And that is the first thing we see about people. Just to give you another example, that when I give my lectures, I give at the end 3 life lessons. And number 1 life lesson, these are lessons that I have learned in my life. And I call life lesson number 1, which is very important, is never ever give up on yourself or on your dreams. Because if you give up, nothing will happen. And as sometimes most of my audience are young people, students, I tell them that I understand growing up is very hard. I actually remember. But if you give up, nothing will happen. I did not give up on myself while I was in Auschwitz. That's the way I survived. I did not know how to survive. But if you keep hammering away, your wonderful minds will come up with answers that will work. Life lesson number 2. Prejudice. One of the reasons that Hitler was successful in rising to power because he used prejudice. And as I look around in the world, unfortunately, prejudice is still with us. And I must confess that I am prejudiced. I do not like the way many of the young people in school dress. If I ruled the world, I would put all students between the ages of 6 and 18 in uniforms. And of course, many young people look at me, all of a sudden, no, I hate uniforms. And I ask them why. Well, they say, I want to express my individuality. I said, that's wonderful. I want you to know, I have good news for you. Every single one of you is a unique individual, regardless of the fact that you wear uniform or not. But the difference would be when you go into the classroom, instead of comparing your outfits, admiring another student's outfit, or showing one of the young girls having a low-cut blouse, which I really despise. I don't think it belongs in school. I don't think it belongs on the street. Instead of that, you could focus on learning because you go to school for one single reason, to improve your mind. And those outfits at times prevent you from focusing on it. And about 15 years ago, I was invited to lecture at the South Vigo High School in Terre Haute, Indiana. I was heading to the auditorium, and in front of me were 3 young boys with very baggy pants. The crotch of the pants was the height of the knee. They were holding up the pants with one hand, and as they were walking, they were cleaning the hallway because the bottoms were dragging along. And I was trying to take in the sight. I was shocked to see that. I have been lecturing by this time 20 years. I have never seen that in any school. And as I was walking behind them, one of them dropped a book. And then he had the audacity to bend down and pick it up. I saw places where the sun never shined. I was very, very embarrassed, and I looked away, turned away. But the next thing that came to my mind, these kids are young people going into Vigo County schools, and I got mad that my money, tax money, actually supports that. So as I entered the auditorium, I went up to the teacher who invited me, and I told him what happened. There was these 3 young boys, and I told him that they looked like bums, therefore they must be bums. And why would anybody want to look like a bum? They probably are drug addicts. So I told the teacher that, and he told me immediately that actually they were very good students and they have never used any drugs. I was very, very surprised, actually shocked to realize it. But I have learned from that even I have to try to get to know the person and judge each person on their merits and content of their character. And if we do that every time we meet people, instead of jumping to conclusion, I think that we can eliminate prejudice one person at a time. I sometimes like to take my listeners to an imaginary trip. And I take them, I said, we are all going to go on a little imaginary trip. We are all going to carry a rock in our hand, stand on an imaginary bridge overlooking a very quiet lake. I take my rock and drop it into the water. Every single one of you will drop your rocks into the water. And we will see maybe 20, 30, 50 rocks being dropped into the water. And what we will see is ripple touching ripple. If we realize that every single thing we do in our lives touches the lives of many other people, and it has far-reaching effect. So when we treat people with respect and fairness, we can eliminate prejudice just like a ripple in the lake because we touch the lives of other people. It sounds like a simple idea, but it cannot hurt to try it. And it works for me because I always catch myself before I jump to conclusion. I don't really know that person, and I must make an effort to judge this person on his or her merits. Unfortunately, it's not being practiced a great deal in the world. I think we are much more willing to use our own little prejudices and maybe impose our ideas on others. But since all my solutions, what I like about all of my solutions, they are always free of charge, just like is my life lesson number 3, which is forgiveness. And I know that most people think that as a survivor of Nazi medical experiments in Auschwitz, that I should hate Germans, I should hate the Nazis, I should hate maybe all the people who were involved. And for a long time I did. But I found out that nobody really cared if the only person who was hurt by it was me. I remember being in Israel in the Israeli army, and one of my colleagues said to me, "So you hate the Nazis, you hate the Germans, so what are you going to do about it?" I thought for a moment, I am not going to do anything about it. You mean you're not going to go attack anybody? I said, absolutely not. And so I thought about it a little bit more. I said, the only person who is really hurt by it is me. But I really did not think beyond that, and nothing really happened in the pain that I was carrying around. Because what is a victim? It's another important question to ask as we talk about prejudice, because there are victims and perpetrators. With prejudice, that is always true, and with all victimization, it's always true. How does a person become a victim? I never volunteered, hey, pick me. And I don't think that any person who ever victimized volunteers to become a victim. So how does it happen? In my case, the Nazis ruled Europe, and my country at the time, it was occupied by Hungarians, so it was Transylvania, Romania, and then they picked us up in our home and took us to a ghetto and then on to Auschwitz. So what really happened is that they took away my power to use my mind or my body or both by force. Now, what happens once people are liberated or released from being victimized? The tragedy is that the pain that they have inflicted upon victims does not go away with the liberation from it. And for 50 years, I hated Germans, I hated Hungarians, I hated the Nazis, of course. And frankly speaking, I didn't like too many people, and I was a very good victim. What does it mean to be a very good victim? It means that I was angry with the world. Unfortunately, that anger I took out on my children, for which I am very sorry. In 1993, my sister died. I came home from a business meeting as a realtor on a Sunday afternoon. There was a message on my answering machine where my brother-in-law informed me in Israel that my sister died. I immediately called Israel and I told my brother-in-law that I wanted to attend Miriam's funeral. He said, we cannot wait for you. I pleaded with him that I have never buried any member of my family. I wanted to say goodbye to her, And by this time, she had one of my kidneys. And I also wanted to say goodbye to my kidney. But he said, we are not going to wait for you. So I was left with a lot of pain. There's something that says, okay. A lot of pain, and I would wake up every night actually feeling the way her lungs filled up with cancer. She couldn't breathe. Then I would wake up screaming. That went on for about a month. A month later, unrelated to her death, I received a telephone call from a professor at Boston College. His name is John Michalczyk, and he asked me to come and lecture at a medical conference in Boston. And he said that he has heard me speak and he wanted me to lecture to some doctors. And I immediately told him that I love to lecture to doctors, which is true. And he said, why is that? I said, well, I go to the doctors and the doctors tell me I'm too fat. I don't eat the right food. I don't exercise enough. And then after they chew me out, I have to pay them. So I would like to tell the good doctors what they do wrong. Because in my opinion, doctors do plenty of things wrong. Then after I chew them out, I look forward to them paying me. So that is my way of getting even with the doctors. And then Dr. Michalczyk said to me, okay, Eva, you like to joke a lot. I said, after crying for a whole month, I prefer to joke instead of cry. And I don't think I have any more tears left. And he said to me, when you come to Boston, it would be really nice if you could bring with you a Nazi doctor. Stunned and surprised at his request, I said, where on earth do you think I can find one of those doctors? Last time I looked in the yellow pages. They are not advertising there. And he said, well, think about it, and I did. I remember that the last project that Miriam and I worked on before she died, in 1992, we finished a documentary that was produced by a German television network. And in that documentary, there was a Nazi doctor from Auschwitz. And I figured his name was Hans Munch. He was not my doctor. I didn't know him, but he was a friend of Mengele's. And I figured if he was alive in 1992, he might be alive in 1993. So I faxed a letter to Germany, to the television network, telling them that Miriam just died and would they please give me Dr. Munch's telephone number in the memory of Miriam, and they did. And that's the way I got Dr. Munch's telephone number. A friend called Dr. Munch and invited him to the Boston conference, but Dr. Munch decided that he didn't want to come to Boston. Instead of that, he was willing to meet with me at his house and invited me to do so. I was very scared about meeting a Nazi doctor. What I remembered of Nazi doctors, I did not want to experience again. But I was very curious if he had any information about our experiments. And I was also curious, why was this Nazi doctor willing to meet with me? I got ready to go to Germany. And when we arrived at his house, I was very surprised and pleased that he treated me with the utmost respect, kindness, and consideration. Unfortunately, he knew nothing about our experiments. He told me that Mengele always said that this was top secret, but he gave me a good interview for my Boston conference. And then, out of the blues, never ever thought about it before, I heard myself say, Dr. Munch, by any chance, do you know anything about the operation of the gas chambers in Auschwitz? And he immediately answered, "This is the nightmare that I live with every single day of my life," and described the operation of the gas chamber. The gas did not come from the shower heads. The shower heads were there just as a camouflage. A hatch opened in the roof. Zyklon B was in canisters, and Zyklon B looks like pellets of white gravel. So the canister was opened and dropped from the outside through the opening in the roof. It fell to the floor. It operated like dry ice, so the gas was rising from the floor. People would try to climb on top of each other, trying to get away from the rising gas, forming a little mountain of intermingled bodies. When the people on the top of the pile stopped moving, Dr. Munch knew that everybody was dead because the people on the top of the pile were the strongest one. And then he would sign one death certificate. Never any names, just numbers. 500, 1,000, 2,000, depending on how many people were in that group. I have never ever heard about it. I was very surprised, but I immediately told Dr. Munch this was very important information and that I asked him to come with me to Auschwitz in 1995 when we would have observed 50 years to the liberation of the camp. By the way, next year, January 27, 2015, we will be observing 70 years to the liberation of Auschwitz. I invite anybody who wants to experience a unique day to come with us to Auschwitz. So he said to me immediately that he would love to come. I got back to Terre Haute, Indiana, very excited that I will have an original document signed not by a survivor, not by a liberator, but actually by a Nazi doctor who witnessed it. I wanted to thank this Nazi doctor, and I didn't know how to thank a Nazi doctor. I did not tell anybody about my idea of wanting to thank a Nazi, because I was sure that people would think I am crazy. But I felt very strongly that I wanted to thank him for his willingness to document the operation of the gas chamber. So I went to a local Hallmark shop and I went to the thank you card section and looked for 2.5 hours reading card after card after card. 2 ladies came up to me and asked me, "Are you finding what you're looking for?" I said, "Not really." "What are you looking for? Maybe we can help you find it." I said, No, thank you very much." I left the card shop, but I could not give up the idea of finding a meaningful gift for this Nazi doctor. So I went back to life lesson number 1, never ever give up. And for the next 10 months, when I was cooking, cleaning, driving the car, I kept asking myself, how can I thank this Nazi doctor? What can I give him as a gesture of my thanks? Lots of ideas popped into my mind. None seemed appropriate until 10 months later. There is a simple idea. How about a letter of forgiveness from me to Dr. Munch? I knew immediately that this was a meaningful gift. But what I discovered for myself was life-changing. I discovered that I, the little guinea pig from Auschwitz, had the power to forgive. No one could give me that power, and no one could take it away. It was all mine to use it in any way I wished. I did not know how to write a letter of forgiveness, but I started working on it, and it took me another 4 months before I was pleased with the content of my letter. Then it occurred to me that somebody might read it and my spelling in English, unfortunately, is atrocious. So I called my former English professor to correct it. She got very excited and enthusiastic, and we met about 3 times. The third time she told me, Eva, that's very nice that you are forgiving this Dr. Munch, but you really need to forgive Dr. Mengele. Your problem is with Dr. Mengele. I tried to debate that this was just a little letter from me. She said, I know. I ask you to do me a favor when you go home tonight. Pretend that you are talking to Dr. Mengele and telling him that you forgive him. I tried it, and I immediately said, wow, I, the little guinea pig from Auschwitz, even has the power to forgive the God of Auschwitz. Mengele was God in Auschwitz. What he wanted, that what happened. And I said, I'm not hurting anybody, so why couldn't I do it? And if I forgive Mengele, the worst of the worst, I might as well forgive everybody who has ever hurt me. And that is the way we arrived there 19 years ago, because we are going to observe pretty soon 69 years to the liberation of Auschwitz. Dr. Munch signed his document. I read and signed mine. I immediately felt that all the burden and pain that I carried around for 50 years was lifted from my shoulder, that I was no longer a victim of Auschwitz, nor was I a prisoner of my tragic past. I call forgiveness an act of self-healing, an act of self-liberation, and an act of self-empowerment. On one of my tweets, I put in the following: forgiveness creates a feeling of wholeness in thought, spirit, and action, moving together, creating a force for healing, liberation, and self-empowerment. And I believe with my whole heart that that's the way it is. I wish that I could convince people who are involved in healing the world. Everybody is always looking for the secret to peace. How can we create world peace? Everybody is putting all the perpetrators, punishing them, hanging them, and putting them in jail. If we spent half as much time on healing the victims of atrocities as we are trying in punishing the perpetrators, we would be way, way ahead in creating a world in peace. Because, in my opinion, anger is a seed for war. Forgiveness is a seed for peace.